I have never been cold-rolled by Northern Ontario Dodge Cummins drivers as often as I have in this F-150 Lightning. I'm Al Alder, and this is the Ford F-150 Lightning. Packing a huge 131 kilowatt-hour battery in this particular spec, Ford claims this thing is good for 515 kilometers. Is it? Well, not so far in my testing, but we're going to get to that. What it certainly does deliver, though, is all the rest of the usual EV experience, only this time in a nice, comfortable lifestyle pickup package. The F-150 Lightning has been with us for about 2 years now, and in that time, it has been a little bit controversial. Yeah, it's big. It's heavy, although that doesn't matter quite so much in a truck because trucks are already heavy. It doesn't burn gas. Perhaps most controversially, it posts huge numbers, in this case 775 pound-feet of torque and 580 horsepower. That should be good for huge towing, so equipped up to 10,000 pounds. Except, of course, you're not going to get a whole lot of range out of that. Then, of course, it doesn't have a traditional solid rear axle either. This thing has now gone front and rear independent suspension, each end now driven by its own electric motor. That is a handy trait, of course, because that means a whole bunch of power neatly packaged right there by each pair of wheels. That also means not a whole lot of moving parts that you need to worry about going wrong. Yes, there are plenty of little bits on here that will definitely be expensive to fix when they go bad, but you don't have a transmission that's going to start making dreadful F-150 noises as this thing ages. Instead, you've just got magnets, windings, and bearings. So then, all this time in, where does this truck fit and who is it for? Well, the F-150 Lightning can technically really be used by much the same crowd as the regular one. It is still a heavy hauling pickup truck. This thing has a full bed. This thing has lots of space for a crew. This has the usual fold-up seats. There are little cubbies all over the place. It even has bonus storage space up in the front because there's no engine there. Better still, it drives better than a usual F-150 too. Despite even the base model coming in some 500 kilos heavier than the heaviest gas F-150, the low position of all the weight in this combined with the all-around independent suspension makes this probably the best handling F-150 we've yet driven. It's a relatively easy truck to navigate. It's got the full suite of modern assists. In this case, we've got Ford's Blue Cruise as well, that answer to GM Super Cruise, which on pre-mapped stretches of highway means eyes up, hands-free driving. Particularly as I ventured up the 400 this weekend, that's been quite refreshing. It takes away a lot of driver fatigue, makes the journey quite easy. Yes, you have to stay with it and pay attention, but the car does a pretty reliable job of managing its speed, its position in lanes, automatic lane changes when you trigger it with the signal stalk, the whole bit. It's not perfect, of course, and it does actually fall a little behind the General Motors system in places. For instance, the GM system will actually change lanes on its own if it sees that there is more space in another one or that it can get past a slower vehicle. This also has trouble with things that, in fairness, many manufacturers still struggle with, and that is that it will continue tracking a car even as it has mostly departed your lane. That means that at times it will think that suddenly you have a whole bunch of space and it'll accelerate really aggressively, at times right toward a slow or stopped vehicle ahead of that one in traffic. Spread out across all of that, you've got surprisingly grounded range estimates as well. NRCan energy consumption figures put this thing at 26.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers city, 33.3 highway, which is pretty steep, or generally 29.8 kilowatt hours per 100 combined. In the case of this here extended range 131 usable kilowatt hour battery, that means the claimed range of 515 kilometers. Put yourself in a fleet spec Pro model or the entry-level XLT trim, and you're looking at a 98 kilowatt hour battery with a claimed 386 kilometers range. That thing actually posts slightly different efficiency figures, but by and large, you're in a similar ballpark. Of course, claimed figures are not always necessarily dead on. In the case of this Lightning, though, I've been surprised. I actually was averaging around 32 kilowatt hours per 100 highway, which is actually one better than what is claimed. In city driving as well, I was actually slightly beating the expectation, running around 25 kilowatt hours per 100. With that being said, my overall actual range out of this thing using it for a long highway journey hasn't actually really measured up. Though I didn't completely exhaust the battery on this journey north, the math breaks down to about 450 kilometers hypothetical range out of this, and that's in really ideal conditions too, mid-20s. Fortunately though for the Lightning, charging brings this back in toward its claims. Ford claims, in the case of this big extended battery, a time to charge from 15, not the usual 10, 15 to 80% in 38 minutes, or 32 minutes in the smaller 98 kilowatt hour battery. That's hypothetically off a 150 kilowatt charger. I ran this on a 200. Max charge rate in this is generally clocked at 150, and I was actually achieving a solid 149 for most of my time charging from 15 to 80. Charging in low 20-degree conditions, I made that 38-minute stretch in 44. 6 minutes off, that's not so bad. It may not be quite as dead accurate as I'm used to with the Hyundai eGMPs, which I've recently tested to within a minute of claim. But it's not like it left me stranded at the fast charger for an eternity either. Now, what of the rest of the F-150 Lightning though? Well, a lot of it is really just F-150 as usual, and it's very clear that Ford has made a point of trying to match that experience. This truck doesn't really beat you over the head with the fact that it's an EV. Yes, it does certain EV things, like it's really heavy on the noise insulation. This here Lariat has dual pane glass to isolate all that noise. It actually does a really good job of road noise as well, though right now I'm on a fresh ground surface. Wind noise is likewise really nicely managed, especially for a pickup truck. And apart from the essentials like your range and your regen rates and so on there in the cluster, the F-150 Lightning doesn't really make the usual self-congratulatory eco-hero point that some other EVs will as you drive it. This just runs without fanfare. It's an F-150, it's got those kind of crummy plastics, it's got some neat little geometries to it, it's got cubbies everywhere, it's got this enormous screen in the middle which is so very distracting and is so frustrating to find things in. Oh my goodness, it's even better too, because when you're on the highway and if you're using the driver assistance, looking for basic things, even certain climate or audio controls, will draw your eyes long enough that the car will start beeping at you and scold you for not watching the road. I'm sorry I can't find things in here, Ford. Maybe make a more straightforward, intuitive interface. Likewise, much as I've complained before, Apple CarPlay integration does feel a little bit smacked in here. It's a little bit awkward finding your way back and forth between the native and projected infotainment setups. Yes, it's all technically there, and some of it within 2 taps, but not in a friendly way. As for the rest, well, you either like Ford pickups or you don't. It's that same usual kick-out tailgate step, which is clever in a way, but I've also seen that same setup really beat to smithereens on job sites. It doesn't have an option for the same style of really sturdy kick-out corner step that you get underneath the Ram, but then nor does it have the silly Ram boxes in the side of the bed either. I know some people do like them, but coming from a trade background, I just find those things kinda silly. They take up useful bed space and make it really difficult to load a pallet into the back. This thing has other little tricks too. A lot of people really like the fold down shifter and fold out center table above this massive cavernous center console here. It's handy for lunch, it's handy for sketching things out. It's a gimmick, yes, but so too are most of the useful features in today's pickups. You've got to remember, after all, that silly little options like this they can just tap into an already engineered platform is where the money is now. The automakers want to sell you a buttload of options in a premium truck. And Canadians have shown that they will absolutely eat that up. Would I spend the money for this here Lariat? Well, no, but that's not just because it's an EV and it's costly. By chance, my family is right close to a 200 kilowatt fast charger up north. The range is not so much a concern for me. The Lightning here made the journey partway to Sudbury on a partial charge without any issue or even hesitation. It's just a nice solid truck. No, really the thing that would stop me is that as much as the trades were all excited when this came out, that they could finally lock their tools up in that frunk and they wouldn't get stolen, I still think it's hilarious that people will go to a job site in anything other than a van. Pickup trucks are lifestyle vehicles, and I think this one really is arguably the truest of them. Yeah, it can tow a big number, but we know now not nearly far enough to necessarily justify it. With that said then, it's a nice family vehicle if you insist on carting your family around in a massive truck. But if you want an EV and you're really just going out for groceries, maybe just look at a Kona EV. For Driving.ca, I'm Al Alder. For more pickup news, reviews, previews, tests, checks, all the rest, be sure to follow us online on Driving.ca and check out our socials over on Instagram and whatever the other one is.